The year 1294. The Pope, Celestine V. He holds the position for 5 months, decrees that popes can resign, and immediately quits his job.
Jared, I'm here to tell you that I'm quitting.
What history doesn't tell you is that he waged war against the Empire of Birmingham so that he could finally destroy the BT Tower and free the Commonwealth from the tyrannical rule of Danny G.
Come to Birmingham! Come to fucking Birmingham!
Let's not be coy, this is my favourite manga. Or at least a contender. The main reason I'm making this video is because it's an excuse to reread it. I read it blind and would rip out my eyes if it meant I could do so again. I encourage you to pause the video and do the same. Read it blind, put down the ice cream scoop. This is Lucas, God's weakest child soldier and canonically horny femboy. Like all gender nonconformists, he was abandoned by his parents as soon as they figured out there was something wrong with him. Unfortunately, this is the Middle Ages. Meaning, at only 14, he too is middle-aged. It also means he cannot follow his natural calling as someone of a classical Greek standard of beauty to become a software engineer, and ends up being drafted into the Azov Battalion. Things escalate a bit more quickly from there. One day, he's in the battle lines when the branch manager of a local McDonald's steps forwards after deciding she needs more horse meat. She's under the command of a conventionally dressed Italian man, whose conservative cranium covering betrays his identity as the Pope. Lucas manages to turn the tides of battle after awakening his own superpower of contagious projective synesthesia. Impressed, the Pope offers to pay his tuition in exchange for a special favour. That is, to help destroy the outlaw regime of England and remove their WMDs, an operation which is not at all influenced by the vast amounts of oil discovered in the North Sea. The Bugle Call describes itself as a warfare action manga, meaning it focuses on the tactics and impacts of war more than the flashy fights of individuals, much in the same manner as the Golden Age arc, Kingdom, or Italia? Is this one of those world wars I keep hearing about? Most of the fighting is left to characters besides Lucas, who picks up a weapon exactly once and then immediately gets a headache. And fucking dies. Supplementing his fighting abilities that will humble even the most powerful of paraplegics is his tactical genius. Make no mistake, though, the manga still has its fair share of excellent fights. Zoe is everything Lucas isn't. Sweet. Simple. Capable of crushing a man's head in her bare hands. She's the one who most often gets into these fights, the one who Lucas has romantic feelings for, and the one who threw a horse at him. Her ability is that she can borrow power from her future self. One small issue, she's also 9 years old.
We can still play ball! She's 9! And that's just fine! She's 9! And that's just fine!
I don't know what to make of this. How am I meant to tell who's grooming who? You see, when she was 9, Zoe took a quick 17-year nap and awoke decades later. This is the first time this has happened. Plenty of authors have pulled the secretly 700 trick, but only Mozoku Sora has the balls to pull the reverse and still make her the love interest. She's also schizophrenic, but at this point that's the least concerning thing about her. The other character of importance is the Dreadlich who directs the plot, whose only immediately apparent power is the ability to walk through doorways without decapitating himself. Well, that and making the trains run on time. He's easily one of the most interesting schemers I've seen. It's hard to even tell to what extent he's manipulating people when telling them they can retire. But you tell me whether or not you think the man who can steal people's powers has prepared a generous 401k. He acts as the driving force behind the story, sending all of the other characters out on missions, while he stays home to practice necromancy on their loved ones. The rest of the cast are also supernatural, being what are called Ramas. People who go through a puberty so harsh it ends with the creation of a new national holiday. There are a total of 8 of them in Pope Buckethead's repertoire, Lucas and Zoe included, with unique abilities varying from immortality to long-range, wife-beating capabilities. Even the straightforward ones like healing and super speed have hidden layers of depth to them. Strangely though, it's the antagonists with the most creative abilities, like the guy who shows up for one chapter and builds a railgun before flying away, or a certain, completely terrifying character who I'm not allowed to talk about yet. But rest assured, we will get to her in due time. The story does a fantastic job of giving each of these characters an opportunity to shine. All of the core cast, and most of the villains, have surprisingly lovable personalities, from nervous messes to being horny enough to have an honorary seat in the Italian Senate. The way the core cast interacts with one another is my favourite thing about the manga, as we get to see so many of them grow and change as the narrative advances. Even the more abrasive characters get their time in the spotlight and develop into something more sociable to the rest of the class. That includes Lucas, who starts off as a misanthropic band kid that is bullied about as much as that label would imply, but comes to appreciate his friendships with people just as lost as he is, far beyond his age. One of the main ways it manages to give so much time to so many characters is through its use of parallel storylines. Its villains are developed by their contrast to the heroes, making both sides of the story far richer. The only problems I take with the story, besides the, multi-track grooming, all originate from the story not being finished. Some of the hints dropped by the Pope have at best worrying implications. It also leaves a lot of questions and inconsistencies about the world that might be addressed at some point. Like, why does the Pope bother with all of the Tard wrangling when he can steal powers? Why do some people develop superpowers long before puberty? Is mental maturity really enough? For those keeping count, that is the third joke about grooming in this video. Let's keep going and set a new high score. The art is of a very high quality, with double-page spreads that excellently convey the scale of the battles and locations, such as when we are shown an average Scottish city. Though, the Bugle Call does something interesting with these pages, where in most we get to see a live twink reaction. Including these panels widens the aspect ratio of its spreads, meaning that these landscapes only come across as even more vast, while also including the actual best parts of the art, the characters. All of the character expressions are highly intricate, adding a layer of characterization more subtle than a Mossad thirst trap.
Silence!
Email.
There's never any doubt about how anyone feels, and the story doesn't feel a need to explain their emotions. All of the characters are constantly giving more information about themselves based on how they react. The only exception to how consistently excellent they are is in the first chapter, where they come across as more than a little warped. Beyond even just the illustrations, the cinematography is also excellent. Take, for example, Zoe's commitment to turn an entire force of French people into a fine bolognese sauce.
Hey, Italian man! Huh?
The entire panel, save for Zoe, is dominated by the horse, emphasizing the weight of the animal and her sheer power. Another example comes during the fight between Magneto and Professor Exhausted. As K releases his ballistic child-seeking missile, the surroundings warp to alter the combatant's relative size and to accentuate the power and speed of individual strikes. This scene also benefits from paneling so excellent that one may only assume it blew off of a passing Boeing aeroplane. Unlike Boeing, and much to the misfortune of my viewer retention, I'm at full liberty to talk about it without the risk of shooting myself 12 times in the back of the head. The entire manga experiments with how it uses its panels, often in more conventional ways, but also to some astounding levels of creativity. In the same manner as Junji Ito creates tension, Higuro Tomori builds anticipation for comedy, action, and tragedy. Small panels are used to create a rising arc of tension right before the turn of a page, which then reveals the payoff. These aren't anywhere close to the most creative layout in the manga. The highest mark of quality of a piece of media is that it uses its medium to the best effect, and the Bugle Call goes far beyond that into the realm of the truly experimental. I want to emphasize one more time that if this sounds interesting to you, go and read it. If not, then let's talk about volumes 3 and 4, which do everything I've mentioned until now in excess.
Out of your friends, which are you?
Truck freak crazy ass. The fight.
The second arc of the Bugle Call sees Benito Rigatoni exterminating the local cane toad population and invading the Bretonian Caliphate. The goal? Find and conscript the mirror armors for the Vietnam War, so that she can use the Gate of Babylon to vaporize Uncle Ho's strongest child soldier, committing his silliest atrocities. He brings his small band of Mujahideen freedom fighters, those being Lucas, Zoe, a slightly more flammable Agni, Kaiji, ultimate loser, and the most ascendant Glowy. One small problem, the Mirror-Ramus disappeared 3 years ago, and as a sad result of being in France. They must deal with a civil war. That turns out to be less of a concern than one might think, as they are teleported through the Mirror-Ramus's trap and leave the Pope behind. He dedicates his efforts to organizing the suicide of Charles de Gaulle, and the others begin to convert the Mirror-Ramus to Catholicism. The Mirror-Ramus's power is to create portals through mirrors. The different applications of this are much like the flight logs of a certain jet named for a Russian novel, highly varied and particularly dangerous. Using these, the Mirror-Ramus used to be the most capable warrior in the land. Her daughter and husband were then killed by bandits, before the anti-pope resurrected the former and the Mirror-Ramus retreated into civilian life. Negotiations begin to break down when she then reveals that her price of service is being given the power of the Clendathri surprise. Well, the basement of unremitting horrors didn't help either. With our group of rogue alphabet agents lost behind enemy lines, they must make it to the Louvre to reclaim the special herbs and spices that power Joan of Arc, before she can kill the Pope. They reach a battlefield where the remnants of the Mirror-Ramus's very own executive outcomes are seizing control of the People's Republic of Montpellier. The following chapters shift their focus more to God's strongest war criminal, who himself has many parallels to the Mirror-Ramus. Both of them lost someone dear to them, both resurrected by a man in a silly hat. Both of them recognize that the person they love isn't here anymore, but both still love them for being what rescued them from such a dark place, and highlights that both of them have been driven to the extremes of isolation to protect the only people they have left. After nearly getting world-famous French barber Robespierre to take a little too much off the top, they manage to pass the blockade and reach Limoges. Unfortunately, the Mirror-Ramus is already there. Now's the best time to talk in a bit more detail about how her ability is portrayed. In much of the manga, the alignment of the panels mirrors the attitude of a certain French politician, bending and warping in unusual ways to best fit the situation. However, when it comes to the actual mirrors themselves, the break in space is shown through the separation in panels. Characters and objects move across the panels, and the swipe of the mirror blades fractures the continuity. The best use of paneling, though, comes when the most sane Frenchwoman steps onto the field. She and Zoe square off before Zoe imitates her enemy and runs for her life. You see, Lucas is channeling the same esoteric Italian spirits that possessed Luigi Cadorna and led him to sacrifice his troops for marginal tactical gain. The only problem being that it all but immediately leads to his near death. The final chapter of this volume is called Flowering. A Ramus can awaken another layer to the lasagna that is their powers, a process named by the chapter's title, and that is exactly what the Mirror-Ramus does, as she shatters through space to bring her blade to her hand, and cuts through the rest of the army in a single swipe. The following is less a duel and more a hate crime, every slice cutting through not only space within the story, but also leading to a break in the panels and allowing the Mirror-Ramus to prove she truly is the storm that is approaching. They fall through all varieties of locations, until, at the very end, Zoe too pulls apart the panels herself for a flying kick to take down the Mirror-Ramus. There's a lot more to these 2 volumes that I could talk about, but going over all of the character moments and amazing art seems pointless. Though some examples of stories that harness their medium may be more experimental, the Bugle Call has the perfect marriage between creative experimentation and using it to tell a story. When the only problems I can give you in the entire manga are the art gets better and a child gets groomed, you know the story is something special. I'm an anime fan, my standards are very low on that second one.